Welcome, I'm Eric Singer, Gazette.com, and this is City Chat as we wrap up 2015 and look forward to 2016 with Colorado Springs Mayor John Suthers. First, thank you so much for being here.
Thanks, Eric.
And of course, my co-host for City Chat, as always, Billie Stanton Anleu.
Billie,
Mayor,
good to see you.
Good to see you also.
Let's go ahead and start our questions to wrap up 2015. Billie?
Mayor, you indicated to me a while back that you think we really need to look hard at the governance of Colorado Springs utilities. And I understand you've been briefed by Merv Bennett and Jeff Green as to what's going on with the council, which also is the board for the utilities. I'm wondering, do you have any ideas as to how the governance perhaps should be changed? Have you kicked it around in your mind? What might be a better model, and what's wrong with the current model, do you think?
Well, Billie, this is just one man's opinion at this
Right.
point. But based on my observations, I would tend to favor a board with greater expertise in utilities, perhaps some sort of a hybrid board where we had some electoral representatives, for example, the at-large council members. There's 3 at-large council members elected by the entire city. And then perhaps 4 people, perhaps nominated by the mayor, approved by the council, that would have expertise in various areas, whether it be finance, whether it be power generation, whether it be water. You know, we could have the charter list the areas of expertise from which people could be selected. And I personally feel that the complexity of utilities has become such that kind of expertise would be very valuable at this point in time going forward. But keep in mind, this is something that the council has to decide whether they're going to refer it to the voters, or whether a group of citizens would come forward and initiate a charter change. So this is not just my opinion that will drive this. It will be either the public's opinion or council's opinion.
And you actually have no official position on the utilities board,
That's right. I think I'm an ad hoc member. I'm entitled to attend the meetings and sit through the meetings, but I have no power under the charter whatsoever.
And then if we had these experts brought on board, say, if that were the model that was ultimately chosen, how would they be compensated? I mean,
well, that would be determined by the charter. And I think they should receive some compensation. I think if we're going to ask people with some expertise to dedicate themselves an amount of time to that, there should be some compensation associated. I don't think it has to be a lot of money. I think it probably has to be more than the council members make. But
more than nothing?
Yeah, well, they make $6,000.
Yeah.
But we'd have to figure that out, and that would be something that would be part of something would be referred to the voters.
Okay, interesting. All right, thank you. And I understand that you and Jeff Green are currently negotiating with David Jenkins on the Norwood development?
I'm not involved in any negotiations, but let me explain, and this has to do with a litigation, so I'll be limited in my comments, but let me give you a little history. The original developer of Banning Lewis Ranch was a man by the name of Frank Aries, and he agreed to an annexation agreement with the city of Colorado Springs that involved an incredibly high density development out there. I mean, in excess of 100,000 people. And in that annexation agreement, there's expressways and things like that. One can debate whether Frank Aries ever actually had an intention to develop Banning Lewis Ranch. As you know, he didn't. He flipped it, if you will. A subsequent buyer went bankrupt, and in the bankruptcy proceeding tried to nullify the annexation agreement. The bankruptcy court, the United States Bankruptcy Court, ruled, I don't know, perhaps 6 months or so ago, that they couldn't do that, and that future developers are still stuck with that annexation agreement. And keep in mind, we're talking about more than just Norwood. We're talking about Oakwood, we're talking about Case. I think there may be some other developers, but at least those 3.
Is that agreement from 1973 or something?
Something like that, okay. That's correct. And so at this point in time, the litigation is the appeal to the Tenth Circuit Court of Appeals has been delayed so that there can be some discussion. And I think the position of the developers is, look, the plans for this today are much different than they were in the 1970s, much less density, more open space. The infrastructure's needs are different. We'd like to renegotiate this annexation agreement. They're meeting with planning, they're meeting with utilities and others. If they could reach an agreement that everybody thought was fair, then they would go to the council and ask them to approve an amendment to the annexation agreement. If not, if either the council doesn't approve or planning and utilities can't reach an agreement about what they'd propose to council, then the case will continue and we'll continue to litigate the case. The important thing is that the developer will pay for the infrastructure costs. The question is, what's the infrastructure that's needed for what's now presently proposed? And of course, when I say the developer pays, ultimately, of course, those who buy the lots and who develop the houses pay because the developer puts that into the price of the lot, puts that into, but they will pay the infrastructure. What's under debate is, given how that project has changed, what's the appropriate infrastructure that ought to be required in the annexation agreement. So we'll see in the next couple months whether, first of all, there's some agreements that can be reached that would be taken to the council.
Okay. This wasn't on the list, but how are the EPA negotiations going right now?
Those will continue in January. And when we're talking here about stormwater negotiations, we have a meeting set up with Pueblo. Lawyers have been meeting with Pueblo. I'll be down in Pueblo in January meeting with the commissioners. There's a meeting with the EPA at which we'll present a report given by our consultants about what sort of program we could, MS4 water quality program we could do with the available funds, this $19 million that we've set aside as a minimum. And we'll see whether we can reach some agreements with Pueblo and with the EPA. But the very sensitive negotiations, and we won't be talking about the essence of the negotiations publicly.
Now it's that time for final thoughts from Mayor John Suthers as we look back at 2015 and look ahead to 2016. Sir?
A great deal of progress in 2015. The citizens stepped up and agreed we have some infrastructure problems to deal with, supported a road tax to generate $250 million over the next 5 years to deal with our roads. We've made some progress as a council and mayor to deal with this long-standing stormwater problem. We're now in negotiations with the EPA and Pueblo to see if we can resolve those issues. Economic development, I think we're going to end the year at unemployment less than 4%. That's been a long time since we've been there. There's a lot of good economic development prospects in 2016. I will remain very focused in 2016 on infrastructure, making sure 2C is properly implemented, the road work is done efficiently and effectively, making sure that we continue, we're not going to kick the can down the road in stormwater, do what we can to resolve these issues and begin to address that longstanding problem. Economic development, I want certain things to happen. We want the Olympic Museum to come out of the ground, break ground in 2016. We want to see some new flights at the airport announced in 2016. We want to see, some other long-standing, desirable projects come out of the ground. I would say a new thing that I think it's, having been in office 7 months, it's now time to start talking about is greater, more modern and effective communication between the city and its citizens. One of the things I've talked about on this program before is possibility of a 311 system, a kind of one-stop shopping for citizens. They have a question about county or city government, they're not sure who does what, they call one number, 311, they're directed to exactly where they want to go. It also has online features. And then I also want to improve the digital outreach between the city and its citizens. we have the talent in the city, and there's a lot of young people out there who, grew up with this kind of communication, and they want to communicate digitally, find out information from the city, give their input to the city, and we want to hear from people. And I think we really need to up our game in that regards. Many cities have done so. I think it's time for us to do so. We've got the talent, and that will be a priority also in 2016.
All right. Well, thank you so much, Mayor John Suthers. City
Thank
of
you.
Colorado Springs.
Appreciate it.
Thank you, Mayor.
City
Happy New
Government
Year's.
Reporter Billie, Stanton, and Anleu. And thank you for joining us in 2015 for City Chat, and we look forward to seeing you again in 2016 for City Chat. I'm Eric Singer on Gazette.com. See you next year.